2023 has been a phenomenal year for gaming. Every single month this year, there has been at least one big release, and in most cases, there's been more than just the one. So I said fuck that and only played 2 2023 releases. Going into 2023, I set out to beat at least one game every single month of the year, because previously, well, I really haven't beaten a ton of games in a year's time. This is something I started doing in 2022 and I intended on making a video on, but I just never really got around to it. I will keep my discussions of the games I cover spoiler free, so none of you have to worry about that sort of thing. But enough yapping, let's get into the games that I beat in 2023. Kickstarting January, we have a game that I played since June of 2022, The Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. Ever since the beginning of 2021, I've been working my way through the Ace Attorney games, and with the completion of this game, I have completed both the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy and the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. With Apollo Justice's trilogy coming out soon, I'm finally going to continue my conquest on this franchise. As for the game itself, this is my second favorite Ace Attorney of all time, right after Trials and Tribulations. I think the Chronicles as a complete package is better than the trilogy, but individually, Trials and Tribulations easily beats this one. Just like the first game, it takes place in Japan when it first opened its borders to the rest of the world, and they run with that premise, especially in this game, with the cases taking full advantage of the technology, or lack thereof, at the time. The characters are just as good, if not better, than the trilogy characters, and there isn't a single case that misses the mark. I also feel as though this game makes the first Great Ace Attorney game much better. In an age where people were falling out of love with this series, this game proves that Ace Attorney doesn't have to be past its prime, and there could still be a game to come out that can rival Trials and Tribulations, just as this game has. In February, I beat 2 games, the first of which was a game I started in December of 2022, God of War 2018, and oh boy, what a masterpiece. This won Game of the Year in 2018 for a reason. Its narrative is top-tier storytelling in every sense of the word. Kratos' character arc alone in this game solidifies him as one of, if not the best video game character of all time. And that's not to discount its other characters, which are all outstanding, but Kratos' journey is truly something special. What makes this game so spectacular, though, is that not only is its narrative incredible, but the gameplay is too. Switching the camera angle from God of War 3 to 4 was definitely a risk, but it still plays similarly to the original trilogy. There's also a ton to do in the world. So many artifacts to collect, armor to craft, bosses to fight. This game deserves every nomination and award it got. And the good news is that we won't have to wait much longer to hear me gush about this series more. The second game I beat in February was Metroid Dread. Unlike the past 2 games, I didn't go into this year intending to beat it. I was just bored and didn't really feel like playing anything I was currently playing at the time, and decided to pick it up again after dropping it halfway through back in 2021. Dread is a phenomenal Metroid game. It takes a lot of the mechanics and style introduced in the Samus Returns remake on 3DS and pushes it even further, practically perfecting the gameplay. The Emmys were a brilliant way to shake up the gameplay, but I have to admit later on they did start to feel straight up unfair. Although I can't act like that's all that bad due to the very forgiving checkpoints throughout the game. I will say though, for being the finale to the Metroid saga, I didn't really understand the story. Maybe that was the point, but something happens in the final cutscene that just didn't really seem to make sense. But that being said, Metroid Dread is an amazing comeback for the 2D entries, and I hope to see more in the future. On March 1st, I got an early birthday present, a PlayStation 5. So naturally, I played the free game included on all PS5 systems, Astro's Playroom. Honestly, it's a pretty fun game, but a damn short one. The platforming feels very smooth and it uses the DualSense controller perfectly. Collecting all the puzzle pieces is a blast, and in October, I actually went back to the game to platinum it, mainly just for something to do. There's not much I have to say for this one, but I'd love to see a full game like this, and for what it is a solid little time. Good news, God of War fans, it's time to talk about Peak. God of War Ragnarok was the reason I bought a PS5, among other upcoming games, but this is the one that really pushed me to get it sooner. There's a debate about whether 2018 or Ragnarok has the better story, but personally I like Ragnarok's larger stakes. Differences aside, they're both next level in storytelling. We are introduced to several new characters, all of which are more fascinating than the last. Odin, Thor, Thrud, Heimdall, and others are all incredibly well written and well additions to the cast. And that's not to mention all the returning faces who are even better here than they were in the last game. Gameplay wise, they improved on the already great foundation that 2018 was. They didn't do any drastic changes, but there didn't need to be, and the adjustments they made added to what makes Ragnarok better in my eyes. God of War Ragnarok is a masterpiece and my second favorite game of all time. I urge you to give these games a try so you too can experience the incredible storycraft offered here. Due to an increase in me getting a life, for the next few months I had to play shorter games. So moving into April, I opted to give an old classic a try. The original Doom was one of the games that revolutionized and kickstarted the genre. Of course, being the FPS genre. The version I played was technically a remaster made for modern systems, which let you aim with gyro controls. I have no idea if this is the optimal way to play or not, because I stuck with gyro the entire time. And honestly, I liked it for what it was. Despite not being able to look up or down, the game controls well. The game also had a solid chunk of challenge to it, as some bosses and levels took me quite a while to beat. I actually recommend playing these games even if you don't have to for 2016 and Eternal. I decided I'm going to, and I look forward to continuing the franchise in the near future. Once again in May, I played a shorter game being Stray. Stray is a very cute and comfy game where you play as a cat in a post-apocalyptic world. I know, it sounds weird, but it works. What I found myself really enjoying the most with this game was just being able to put on some music and not really having to immerse myself into a world. Maybe some people do that, but to me, this game was more about the fun parkour and exploration and just vibing in general. For what it is a fun game, but I do not understand how this game was nominated for Game of the Year. This is the most 7 out of 10 game I've ever played. However, I'd be lying if I said I'm against the idea of a sequel, considering the ending. I've had an extensive Nintendo background growing up, and this year I've made decent progress through Sony's first-party offerings, but I just haven't gotten into Xbox games just yet. That was before June, when I gave Gears of War a try. As someone who struggled getting into the first Halo campaign and shortly dropped it, Gears of War was a welcome surprise, as I greatly enjoyed the campaign. But considering I keep up with Fortnite, maybe I'm just a sucker for third-person shooters developed by Epic Games. Gears is a satisfying cover-based third-person shooter where you play as Marcus Phoenix, or Dom Santiago if you're playing co-op, and are in the middle of a war with an alien species dubbed the Locust Horde. I think so you pronounce that? I don't really know. The story itself isn't particularly special, but the gameplay, despite some clunkiness, is an overall positive experience. Each of the weapons has its moments, but it was fun to figure out what my go-to loadout was as I advanced through the story. Not too much to say about this one, but it was a very fun time. Similarly how I randomly decided to start Metroid Dread, in July, I decided to finally give Bowser's Fury a go. Now don't get me wrong, this was a very fun time, and filled my 3D Mario shaped hole in my 3D Mario shaped heart. But at the end of the day, this is really just a tech demo and only takes a couple hours to complete. That being said though, I enjoyed every second of this game, and the Fury Bowser sections only amplified that. Especially that last one. I would love to see a full game similar to this, but I'm really just begging for a fully new 3D Mario game just in general. August was a really rough month for me, so without getting into it, the games I beat this month really helped me through it. Firstly, Batman Arkham Asylum. Ever since playing Spider-Man PS4, I knew this was a series I had to get into, and I finally bought all the games. This game is not only one that revolutionized superhero games, but all of gaming as a whole. And while its sequel Arkham City gets credit for most of that, Let's not discount Arkham Asylum at all because it is incredible. Although it's not open world, it takes advantage of its map and uses genius levels of storytelling through its world. There's so many subtle things that you can pick on that hint towards the end of the game, and it's really cool. I've heard some pushback against its combat since at its core you're really just mashing a few buttons, but it's so much deeper than that. If you want to master the combat, you can become a badass doing so. As for the story and characters, it's all great. This is probably my favorite adaptation of Batman I've seen so far. Granted, I haven't seen that many. But Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill slaughtered their respective roles. Not to mention all other actors and characters who are just a joy here. I really look forward to continuing the series with Arkham City and seeing what the craze is all about. The second game I played this month was a replay of Spider-Man Miles Morales for two reasons really. The first being that I just wanted to platinum the game, which requires you to beat it on New Game Plus, and the second being that I wanted to get back into the swing of things, pun not intended, for Spider-Man 2 in October. For me it's close between this and the first game as I think they're better at different things, but I prefer PS4 due to it having a phenomenal story and decent combat, whereas Miles Morales has an okay story at best and great combat. I still think they're pretty on par with each other though. This game helped me keep my mind off things this month, so I really appreciate it for that, same as Arkham Asylum. I don't really have much else to say about this one simply because it's a replay, but I definitely recommend it for the swinging alone. It's September, and we're finally talking about a game that released in 2023, Fire Emblem Engage. Typically, there's one game that takes me a massive chunk of the year to beat. Last year was Pokemon Legends Arceus for whatever reason, and this year, it's Fire Emblem Engage. I was making good progress streaming the game consistently on Twitch in January to March, but since I started to accidentally get a life, I stopped playing it for the most part. I eventually set my foot down and said enough is enough and beat it this month. Engage is a weird game. On one hand, its gameplay is incredible and satisfying, but on the other, the story and characters are generic and soulless. I get that as someone who got into the series through 3 houses, that not all the games are going to have such incredible world building, story, and characters, but the jump from 3 houses to this is seriously sad and needs to be studied. I'd be lying if I said I didn't like some characters, but the vast majority made me want to rip my ears off, simply due to the god-awful writing. Like, how did we go from this?
I am a murderous monster. My hands are stained red. Could one such as I truly hope for such a life? As the sole survivor of that day, do I have the right to live for myself?
To this.
I guess fell dragons have to die in the end. But I wanted to be a good dragon.
Regardless, I enjoyed the game enough, even if it's just due to the outstanding tactical gameplay, but it's definitely a disappointment in my eyes. Gaming-wise, October is the month this entire year had been building up to, at least for me, as Spider-Man 2 finally dropped this month, and I streamed the entire thing, then forgot to upload the VODs and lost them. To be honest, I still don't know how I feel about this game. At the moment I beat the game, I loved it and gave it a 10 out of 10, and even said it's a competitor for my favorite game of all time. And then time passed, and I saw some very valid criticisms online, especially about the second half of the story, but the gameplay improvements are insane, and it showcases what the PS5 can really do within the first 10 minutes of the game booting up. The swinging in combat is a drastic improvement over the last 2 games, so with that alone, I feel like I can easily consider this my favorite Spider-Man game, but Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales were both 9 out of 10s for me. I even considered a PS4 a 10 out of 10 at a point in time, so I have no idea how I'd rank this game. There's so much here to love, but there's so much to criticize as parts of this game are just clearly unfinished. Nearly all of Venom's lines cut from the game. I still need more time to orchestrate my thoughts, but what I do know is I had an absolute blast playing this game, and it really helped me through recent personal events. My game for November was one I started all the way back in May and spent an unnecessary amount of time to complete. Fun is the word I would use to describe Ratchet Clank 2016. The gameplay, fun. The dialogue, fun. The characters, fun. It's no wonder how the original kickstarted this franchise. It's full of personality. As fun as it is though, I didn't find the game to be anything particularly special. I like everything here, don't get me wrong, but it felt pretty standard. That being said though, the combat and puzzles are made very well, and I applaud the upgrade system. It's unique, but also satisfying to unlock more abilities for your weapons. I got my hands on Ripped Apart, so I look forward to further diving into this fun world. We're here in December, the end of the year. Rounding out this year, I played one game and one DLC, both of which took me on journeys through the Norse afterlives. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla was an unexpected but welcome surprise at this year's Game Awards. Valhalla is a roguelike where you travel through Kratos' memories and deal with all the baggage he's been piling on through the years. It's just a really long therapy session. I'm very surprised just how much story there actually is here though, but I'm sure as hell not complaining. I hadn't played the game since I beat it, so I was very rusty, but in the end, I think this mode actually made me better than I was when I used to play the main game. If I didn't love Ragnarok enough, this free DLC made me love it even more. The final game I beat this year was none other than Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. This might be the most immersive game I've ever played. The game knows its strengths and runs with them. Early on, it's easy to feel discombobulated as this game can be very trippy, but that wears off once you get the hang of it. The star of the show here is its emphasis on mental health, with Senua suffering from what she's told to be the darkness, but in reality it's a mix of psychosis, schizophrenia, and bipolar depression. I love just how personal this story is and the themes present here, and I think it's a game I needed to play after the year I had. Not to say my struggles were anywhere near the levels of poor Senua, but I think the message at the end was a very important one for me. But that's enough depressing shit. Go play this masterpiece. I'm beyond excited for what the sequel has in store next year. While I only played a couple games that actually released this year, I still played an incredible group of games this year. Of the 16 games I played, my average rating was an 8.37 out of 10. Comment down below what your favorite games you played this year were, and I'm looking forward to 2024, as there are many games I look forward to playing. I'm excited to see if they can top the colossal year I personally had in the gaming sphere.